How much would you endure for the sake of love before the person you trust most turns into your greatest enemy? They say the walls have ears, but in my home, they had eyes, and they were judging my every move. When I married Julian, I thought I was entering a sanctuary of shared dreams and morning coffees. Instead, I found myself in a psychological chess match I never asked to play. The opponent, my mother-in-law, Beatrice. She was a woman of refinement and heritage, which in her mind meant that no woman was ever quite good enough for her only son, especially not a primary school teacher from a working-class borough like me. From the day I moved into the family estate in Surrey, she treated me like a temporary tenant. "Elena, darling," she'd say, her voice like honey poured over broken glass. "We don't really use that much garlic in this house. Julian's father always said it was the scent of the common." I would smile, swallow my pride, and adjust the recipe. I loved Julian, and I thought my patience would eventually win her over. I didn't realize then that in Beatrice's world, kindness was not a bridge. It was a weakness to be exploited. She would move my belongings, accidentally delete my work emails from the shared computer, and whisper to Julian about my forgetfulness. The tension was a low hum, a fridge buzz you eventually stop hearing until it suddenly cuts out, leaving a deafening silence. I felt the air shifting. Something big was coming. Have you ever felt a trap closing in on you, knowing exactly who set it but powerless to stop the teeth from snapping shut? It began with the disappearance of the Everleigh Brooch. It was a hideous piece of Victorian gold and pearls, but to Beatrice, it was the crown jewel of her identity. "I can't find it anywhere, Julian," she wailed one Tuesday evening, her hand fluttering to her throat as if she were gasping for air. "I left it right here on the vanity. It's been in our family for 4 generations." Julian, always the dutiful son, looked concerned, suggesting she might have misplaced it. "I am old Julian, not senile," she snapped, her eyes darting toward me while I sat at the dining table, gratting papers. I felt a cold shiver. "Perhaps someone felt it would look better in a pawn shop window than in a jewelry box," she added. When I asked if she was suggesting I took it, she simply sighed, a long, martyred sound. For the next 3 days, the house was a tomb. Julian grew distant, his eyes avoiding mine. The seeds of doubt had been planted in the most fertile soil, a son's misplaced loyalty. I searched my room, my car, even the garden, desperate to find the brooch just to end the nightmare. I didn't know that Beatrice had already hidden it in the one place I'd never look, inside the lining of my own winter coat. What does it feel like to be branded a thief in the very house you called home? The confrontation happened on a Friday. It was raining. One of those gray, miserable British afternoons where the sky feels like it's collapsing. I walked into the living room to find my suitcases already packed and sitting by the front door. Julian stood there, looking defeated, while Beatrice stood behind him like a dark shadow, clutching the brooch in her hand. "Explain this, Elena," Julian said, his voice hollow. "Mother found it in your coat, tucked into the hem." I cried out that I hadn't put it there, begging him to look at me to remember who I was. He stepped back as if my touch were toxic. "I wanted to believe you," he whispered. "But the lies, the constant forgetfulness, and now this. My mother said you were after the family name, but I didn't think you'd stoop to petty theft." I shouted that she had planted it, but Beatrice didn't argue. She simply shed a single, perfectly timed tear and whispered that she no longer felt safe with me there. "Go, Elena," Julian said, his voice hardening. "My solicitor will be in touch." I was ushered out into the rain with nothing but 2 suitcases and the shattered remains of my dignity. As the heavy oak door clicked shut, I saw Beatrice's face through the window. There was no more crying, just a thin, triumphant smile. When the world turns its back on you, do you crumble, or do you finally learn how to stand? The first month was a blur of cheap motels and tears. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I had no husband, no home, and a reputation that Beatrice was busy tarnishing across every social circle we shared. But then, something shifted. In the silence of my small, rented studio flat, I realized something vital. For 3 years, I had shrunk myself to fit into a house that never wanted me. I had been a good wife to a man who didn't trust his own heart over his mother's whispers. I stopped crying. I poured my energy into my teaching and started a small blog, sharing my journey of starting over after emotional abuse. I found a community of women who had survived similar mother-in-law archetypes. Their stories gave me the one thing Beatrice couldn't steal: perspective. I realized that my expulsion wasn't a tragedy, it was a rescue. I was free from the gaslighting. I was free from the garlic-free meals and the silent judgments. I began to thrive, my skin glowing with the radiance of someone who no longer has to look over their shoulder. I wasn't just surviving. I was becoming the woman I was always meant to be before Julian's shadow dimmed my light. Can a lie built on gold and spite ever truly withstand the quiet, persistent light of the truth? 2 years later, I was sitting in a cafe when a disheveled man approached my table. It took me a moment to recognize Julian. He looked older, tired, and deeply unhappy. "Elena," he said, his voice cracking. "I saw your blog. I saw how well you're doing." I looked at him, feeling a strange sense of detachment. The man who had broken my heart now looked like a stranger. He sat down, his hands shaking, and told me that Beatrice had suffered a stroke. In her confusion during recovery, she had bragged to the nurses about how she sewed the bait into the lining to get rid of the commoner. "I am so sorry. I've lost everything," he whispered, tears in his eyes. I looked at the man who had stood by while I was thrown into the rain and felt no urge to scream. I felt only peace. "I forgive you, Julian," I said softly, "but I don't want you, and I certainly don't want that house. You see, the difference between us is that you're still in that hallway, waiting for her permission to live. I left that hallway a long time ago." I walked out of the cafe, leaving him with the bill and the truth. Resilience is not about how hard you can hit back. It's about how much you can grow after you've been knocked down. Injustice can strip you of your home and your reputation, but it can never take away your character unless you let it. Elena didn't need a court of law to prove her innocence. She proved it by building a life so beautiful that the lie no longer mattered. Thank you for joining me for today's story. It's a tough reminder that sometimes, the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones who can hurt us the deepest. But as we saw with Elena, being discarded is often just the universe clearing the path for something much better. Have you ever dealt with someone who tried to manipulate your reality? How did you find the strength to stand your ground? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Don't forget to like this video if you found value in Elena's journey, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about the strength of the human spirit. Until next time, remember, your truth is your power.